the Northern Kentucky Forum, and we have been working on strategies to stay connected with the community in the virtual world now that we have been cast into that. So thanks for joining us this afternoon. This is our second Zoom Cafe. We'll schedule some more. You can follow what we're doing at nkyforum.org and also on Facebook. We are working right now on a couple of small group dialogues on the issues coming up in the 2020 presidential campaign. We'll have one in late April and one in early May, the first one on healthcare and the second on immigration. So watch for those. They'll be scheduled soon, and we'd love to have you join in with us on those. This afternoon, we have with us the Kenton County Clerk, Gabe Summe. Gabe is in her third four-year term in office. She comes from a distinguished Kenton County political family that has served our community for a number of years, for going back probably to the 1950s, Gabe.
Easy. Yeah, easy. My dad.
Thanks to the Summe family for all you've done. But Gabe is the Chief Election Officer for Kenton County. So this is, of course, a challenging time and challenging year with what we're going through to keep the elections happening. And there are some changes that have already happened that you probably know about, such as the delay of the primary and some changes that happen as a result of that. So she'll talk about those. When she's finished talking, we'll go to the Q&A. You'll see a chat box on your screen. Type your question there, and I will be watching those. And once we get to the Q&A, we will get those to Gabe. We are scheduled to go an hour. We will go that full hour so long as we have questions. If the questions start to disappear and we're done, we'll adjourn early. But Gabe, thanks for being with us. Everybody should know that the county clerk is the chief election official, but also an important record keeper. It's where we go to get our car plates renewed, to get a marriage license. Deeds are recorded there. All of this work continues and is being adapted to this new environment. Gabe, good afternoon and thank you.
Well, thank you, Mark. I apologize to everyone. This is my first time doing something Zoom, so please bear with me as well. And as Mark said, as the Kenton County Clerk, and of course up in this region, we have a lot of other county clerks and what we consider Northern Kentucky, which is about 8 counties. So some of what I'm going to be speaking about is directed more towards Kenton County. Every county is doing something a little different just based on what they have available to them as far as protocols and how their particular county operates. But a quick thing before we get into elections is that if you all are looking to get your driver's license renewed, that's actually the circuit clerk's office. And I believe the administrative office of courts and the chief justice actually have all of those offices are completely closed. I believe you can still leave them a message, which would be 292-6579, but that is actually not part of the county clerk's office. So I'm sorry, I can't answer any of those questions. But as far as renewing your cars, right now, you have a 90-day delay. There will be no penalties or interest on any of your cars if you've not been able to renew them. And even though my physical office, well, both of my physical offices are closed, you still can transact business with the office. The simplest way is to do it by mail. You can also drop it off. We now have a drop box off in the beginning, or I should say at the front doors of the 1840 Simon Kenton Way. That's our new facility. That's in Covington. Just drop it in the mail there. You can also call in at 392-1652. That's my direct auto line. Or we do have that web renewal, and you do have to use a credit card and things of that nature. So you still can do that. But again, if you can't do it right now, you do have like a 90-day delay. There are no penalties and interest. And again, most of the law enforcement has been notified that due to that, the governor's executive order, that they would likely not be ticketing anybody at that point. As far as some other things in my office, recordings, we're still open for that because people can mail, FedEx, UPS, or drop off. I'm working on, actually, I'm glad I'm on Zoom today because I'm working on how to process people's notaries using Zoom. So if that's been delayed for you, I'm working on that process, as well as how to do marriage license. the way our physical office is set up has not been making it very easy for us to do a lot of things unless we do them by a virtual or video conference. So again, bear with us while we work on those issues. But for right now, I know the election is of massive importance to everybody, and so I do want to get to that. But if you do have any other questions about other parts of my office, please send them to Mark, and I can either get your email address or address them later. As far as the election, the interesting thing about Kentucky's statute, or I should say constitution, is that the Secretary of State and the governor really need to work together, and they have a very limited amount of time in which they can expand a primary or delay any election. And that's already happened. So that means that they agreed that they would go by the Constitution and the statute, what allows them to put it back 35 days from when it would normally be held. The election is now, or the primary will be on June 23rd. What is that going to look like? Well, I'm still waiting on some particular decisions to be made by the State Board of Elections and the Secretary of State's office. They are working or waiting for something to be decided on or signed off by the governor, a particular statute that would allow the Secretary of State and State Board of Elections to potentially modify the manner in which we actually operate our elections right now. And once that's decided, then I can, of course, happily give everybody some idea of what we will be doing. Unfortunately, some of this is still up in the air, but the goal right now is still June 23rd. But in the meantime, there are a lot of things voters can do to make sure that whatever process or manner in which this election will be produced, or I should say executed, will need to be done so that everybody's ready to go. And one of those things that I recommend is for people to make sure that they are properly registered, that they review their registration and make sure all their information is correct in case they've moved. And that's going to be important, because if we do end up with something that looks more like a mail out process, which I'm not sure, that's my caveat, I'm not sure what it's going to look like, but if that happens, I need to have very clean addresses in the system. So there's a really nice website that everybody can use, and it's called elect.ky.gov. It gives you some very nice options. One of those is the top button, which allows you to register. The next one has an election calendar. Find My Polling Location has two options to it. Well, it's one option, but gives you really good information. One, it allows you to see that you're registered, where you're registered, and if we did have a in-person voting process, you would be able to, it would tell you exactly where you need to go. My recommendation for this to work the best is just make sure you put in your first, last name, and date of birth. Don't worry about putting in your social. Just that will help us define where those little red marks, those are my required fields. Those are going to be nice and clean and give you your information. Because Kentucky has a closed primary system, it will also indicate whether you're registered as a Democrat, Republican, Independent, other, Libertarian. And again, this particular election for the primary, there really isn't anything on the ballot other than a Democratic ballot and a Republican ballot. So any of my independent or nonpartisan voters, there really isn't anything on the ballot in the primary at this point. We do have a lot going on in the fall. So even if you are not going to be able to vote in our party preference primary, please make sure you go online and check out your information so that we're ready to go for the fall. If you've changed locations, that's fine. Again, Find My Polling Location will show you information about yourself, but if you need to change it, then go up to register online to vote. There you can register for the first time or modify any of your information. It's a very handy little tool. And so when you're looking at this particular thing, and it's review your registration, but the top button is where you need to be, make sure you have your driver's license. Why? Because if you put that number in there, it will pull over your signature from your driver's license and you won't need to proceed with anything else. If you don't have one and you're on an iPad, you can do an electronic signature. If you don't have one, it will still let you go through Just on my end, I will pull off your data and then send you the card in the mail, because I will need your original signature for most part. A lot of times address changes happen through driver's license, but with them being shut down, this is the best way to make any updates to your particular record. So, and the only other thing I want to let people know is that please only use this website. There are lots and lots of websites out there that say register to vote and we will connect you online. On election day, I have people call me all the time and say, but why am I not properly registered to vote? Because they used some other website and they never forwarded the information to me. And I hate to hear that. So please only use the approved one that's approved by the Secretary of State and the State Board of Elections, which is this elect.ky.gov, and you can register online that way. That is tied directly into the state, and they were able to process your information at that point. Any other site, if they don't forward it to me, then I won't know that you've even registered. So that's my caution why people are struggling or are really, wanting to make sure that they're properly registered to vote. I think that moving forward, I just want to make sure that everybody feels very comfortable about how they can, and also absentee voting right now. So absentee voting is still available for anybody who currently qualifies, okay? I have on my website, and this is strictly Kenton County, but it does have a lot of the information because it's the same law for every county in Kentucky, at kentoncountykyclerk.com. You can go into the absentee voting area and it will give you all the instructions or requirements for whether you qualify for an absentee ballot by mail. And if you do, there's even a little button in there that will allow you to fill out an application. That it's basically a request, and that comes to me and I can process that. Right now, it's still limited to age, disability, or illness. My college students, those who are in the military, go ahead and just read those protocols. But if you do fit that category right now, I recommend that you go ahead and fill out the request form. It's great, it's simple, it gets me all the information I need to proceed for you. If things change after this, well, of course, I'll be reaching out to Mark and we might be able to do another Zoom and give people some additional information on how best to do that. This is only Kenton County, but even that, all of the information about what you need to qualify for absentee voting right now, I recommend you look at it because it will apply to other counties as well. I think that kind of covers what I wanted to get out there, Mark.
Thank you. We have a, so folks, we just type your questions and we'll relay them to Gabe. But we have a question from a voter who recently moved, new address, and she received a postcard from your office confirming the change. She's wondering, when she shows up to vote in person and her driver's license has a different address, will that create any sort of will she have any disqualification issues?
Great question. Right now, any Kenton County registered voter who's already a registered voter in Kenton County, anytime that they move within the county, it doesn't matter. You will always get to vote on election day, regardless of what precinct you are in now. What normally happens is if your driver's license doesn't match, and this is assuming that we're having in-person voting. So if that person uses their driver's license and we use e-poll books in Kenton County, it would still generate that person, okay? Because I will have already made the change on my side and we're good to go. But if there isn't, there's a little button on all my e-poll books that basically tell my clerk, the person who's checking people in, to contact the office to verify. So for the most part, we have a lot of other protocols in the background to make sure people are able to vote. Now, Senate Bill 2, which was the big voter ID bill, was vetoed by the governor. I don't know if that will survive this legislative session, which I think ends next week on April the 15th. If it does, it modifies things very slightly. For the most part, most people have driver's license. If not, we always have lots of other protocols to work around that issue.
Real simple question. I think somebody asked if you would repeat the phone number for renewing your car tags.
Oh, absolutely. There's two ways in, but the direct line is 859-392-1652.
You, I think, have been receiving a lot of calls because of the Wisconsin primary. What are people asking, and what's your answer?
So Wisconsin, because of the timing of trying to get all your officials together to say, are we doing an in live or a mail only ballot? People, of course, based on the virus, are very concerned. And so I'm getting a lot of questions about whether we will be following Ohio and having a mail only ballot. And the answer to that is I'm waiting to hear what they're going to do today. We're still waiting again for House Bill 351 to be signed by the governor. In that bill, it allowed the Secretary of State to work with the State Board of Elections to modify the manner in which an election is held under an emergency only. So for the most part, we're not changing the way Kentucky elections will look in the future forever. We're just talking about emergency situation. Right now, the statute is so strict, it says only time and place. It doesn't say the manner. And our current manner is both a little bit of absentee, which is either walk-in or mail. And we also, of course, always have election day where there's precincts and people actually physically go to their precinct and vote that day. But right now, we're kind of in a holding pattern. It's obviously an option that's on the table for them at this point.
So there's kind of a related question to that, given the potential changes because of COVID-19. Any concerns about the validity of the election?
So right now, we already get mail-in ballots. We already have people walk in our office. So the absentee process, even if it's expanded to include any voter, those same protocols for security are going to be followed. They are going to be, if this happens, and again, if it goes out to somebody, I have to make sure first before it goes out that they are a registered voter. And there's a way that we do check how that person is on our end through our voter registration system. When the ballot goes out, we have certain information that's on the envelope that goes to them and the envelope that comes back to us so that we can clarify that that's the person who sent it. And then the rest of our protocols stay the same. They go into a lockbox. We verify that information. And of course, anything we receive, and again, some things are up in the air, but for the most part, our certain security protocols will be the same that we follow, even if it's on a larger scale.
A couple of questions and the two of you asked this. You may, if I get this wrong, just send the chat because the questions are about training. And my presumption is that those questions are, will training for poll workers continue as usual? What's happening on that front?
So I'm kind of getting used to living in limbo, and I feel bad that a lot of them are as well. And I try to communicate very clearly with my my poll workers, and I send some emails, and I try to keep email addresses for all of them. But right now, I haven't changed anything depending on what the decision will be made today, hopefully by the State Board of Elections. I already have June training dates just in case my April ones don't go. But for anybody out there as a poll worker, I got you covered. I'll be sending you a note whether we're having class or not, because if the election does change in a quite big a deal and we don't have precincts, then I likely won't have training and I likely won't have a volume of people who will be working the polls that day. But again, big if, waiting to hear what's going to happen.
Maybe you could just take a moment and talk about being a poll worker. I know the county clerks often are recruiting additional poll workers. Are you set? What's involved in being a poll worker? Is it still possible to be one in 2020?
Oh, well, for right now, again, depending on what happens in June, I'm assuming we'll be up and running and having precincts just like we have normally for the general election, which will be a big election. Basically, anybody who's been a precinct election officer in the past, I send them a letter in the beginning of the year saying, can you work? And then I have somebody in my office who calls, we set up a training schedule. But anybody who is interested in being a poll worker, that would be great. The number to call is 392-1640. Again, 392-1640. That's my training coordinator. She's not in the office right now because right now we're not sure what's going to happen. But basically, to be a poll worker, there's 3 different jobs that you can have there. You can be the clerk, which is the person who checks people in, working the iPad, taking IDs. And then there's my sheriff, who's kind of the person who makes sure everything is working properly within and making sure people get their IDs out. Actually, the clerk and the sheriff kind of work together. They're kind of each other's backup. And then we have 2 judges. And those, of course, are the people who are running the actual voting machines. Those always have to be one Democrat and one Republican, or the opposite parties, so that we can keep parity. And they're the ones who are taking care of making sure the scanner works, or if people are using what we call the ADA machine, or what we call the e-slate. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I always give a little more information over the phone when someone calls to see what they're interested in. But I kind of cross-train all of my poll workers. So I have a huge shout out to all my Kenton County poll workers. They're fabulous. I love working with them. They're great. And over the years, we've kind of cross-trained everybody because, well, it just makes more sense. It gives everybody a chance to get a break. And everybody's just it just makes a better flow for the day.
I'm going to circle back to a little bit of the conversation earlier, because we've had a couple of questions about mail-in balloting. Essentially, can you imagine that we might go there, or that this is a prompt to consider that in Kentucky? And whatever thoughts you might have on whether that would be a good change, a possible change and a positive change, or not.
There are certain states that already do all mail-in ballots. And then there's some states that do half and half. For the most part, any state, then they tell you they do a mail-only ballot, that's really not that's not exactly how they're set up. Based on certain things, there are certain people that don't have mailing addresses. So there's always some kind of component where somebody can go to a location or drop off something because of their you have to make sure it's available to all. So even though the majority, or maybe 90% of their particular population can do mail-in, they always have to offer some other alternative. And if Kentucky goes to that, which, given the way Kentucky has run their elections in the past, and it's always worked really well, I don't know if it's something that's going to be considered. The county clerks run the election based on a lot of the other protocols that are decided by, again, your legislators, your state board of elections, and your secretary of state. We, of course, are a voice in that, so we're always trying to make it easier to vote. But as far as whether we will, there's a lot of people in that mix to make that decision, and I'm not sure what will happen. Interestingly enough, it's actually a cheaper way to put on an election because you don't need as much equipment, you don't need as many locations. Currently, I have 105 precincts. It's kind of like putting on a wedding reception at 105 different places. So it is a lot of planning, it is a lot of detail, and since it works for Kentucky, I'm not sure if it will really change. It may change some of our protocols. Completely going to all mail-in, I really doubt that.
Kind of a related question. We're all using an app now to order our carry-out food, our groceries, our farm, refilling our prescriptions. And we're used to voting on reality TV shows with online voting. So why in the 21st century are we not doing online voting yet?
Well, greater minds than me who understand all the security protocols that there are in the world as it relates to online shopping and the amount of hacking that could be there, I think that that would be a conversation that would be very hard for people to, I think people think that it's that simple. I just don't know if people understand some of the security that would have to be there for people to feel comfortable about the result of an election. And the fact that right now I could get into DSW or whatever and somebody could get my credit card, that's concerning. Somebody being able to change my vote, really concerning. So I'm not sure that that will ever get to that point.
I have a historian chatting who has a history question for you, wondering if, in view of what's going on this year, if you've had occasion or an interest in looking back at voting during the Civil War, voting during the Spanish flu, voting during other serious interruptions in our life, and what similarities this may bear to that.
As somebody who also likes history, I have to admit I have not taken the time to really see how that worked. In the past, I can just tell you that in Kentucky, voting wasn't a private setup as it is now. I mean, you walked in, there was the poll, and it was actually a big book. They wrote your name down, and they asked you who you wanted to vote for, and they marked it for you. So, and you can kind of tell that because I have one of the 1869 poll books from Independence, which is a beautiful book, but you can see all the handwritings exactly the same. So as somebody stepped up, I don't know exactly how they did, and if that historian would like to find out, that would be awesome. I would like to know that.
The last week with our Zoom Cafe, we were with Dr. Lynn Sadler of the Health District, and we heard a lot about the precautions of staying 6 feet away, which seems to be now 26 feet, I think, washing hands and staying at home and so forth. So a couple of questions related to that, both from the standpoint of voters and the poll workers. Even if things loosen up a little bit, I'm certain we'll all have some insecurities about being in close quarters with other people. Are you thinking through that about what public health protocols will be, we'll see when we go to the polling place, assuming we get to go to them?
That is an ongoing discussion that not only the County Clerks Association is having right now, but also we are having that discussion with the State Board of Elections and the State Secretary of State, because even if we are done or the virus has run its course, June, July, you don't know what will happen for November. And at that point, I think given the fact that, you know, it's a presidential, this is our heaviest voting, we're really going to have to look at how do we set up those who are at the polling location that day. How do we give them gloves and masks and all those kind of things to protect them? And what is that going to look like for the voter walking in? And right now we are sitting here writing down, because we're in a metro area. So I have people who travel, you know, going to Ohio and Indiana more so than other counties. But, you know, people are very mobile right now, so you don't know where they've been. And so what is that going to look like? I have a feeling that we're going to have a lot of kits as far as cleaners and all of that. And if we have time now to know what that's going to look like, then we'll have time to get the supplies, because right now I've been ordering supplies for my office. I can't find Lysol wipes anywhere. So what's going to happen? And of course the funding, if that comes down from the federal government, so they might even have some restrictions and some specific protocols that we must follow at that point. I just really want to make sure that this primary election goes off well. And so I'm just waiting for them to tell me which way we're heading at this point.
In your presentation, you talked about absentee balloting, but we have a specific question about that, and maybe it's just good to review that again. And I don't know if we need the webpage back up for that, perhaps, but in any case, people just want to kind of hear again. And we had some audio trouble with some participants early on, so maybe people didn't hear it. But what are the absentee ballot regulations in Kentucky? How do you get an absentee ballot mailed to you? Is anything changed because of COVID-19?
So right now, until the manner of the election has been changed, and if it does get changed, then we will let people know. But right now, if you do qualify for an absentee ballot, as far as a mail-in absentee ballot, there are certain criteria or requirements that you must meet. Those are on my website at Kenton County, KY.com, and under elections, and you can go to absentee voting, and you can see those different requirements to the mail-in, which is at the bottom. And if you currently qualify under one of those requirements, I would strongly recommend that you start requesting your absentee ballots now. If you don't, then I hope that we have some answers for you soon. Right now, and this is only in Kenton County, I have an online request that you can do and fill out, which gets emailed to me so we can process it. Makes things a little faster for people. It also makes sure that I get all the information that I need so that I can process your request faster. Your other counties, the requirements are the same for every county in Kentucky, but the key is to go and actually contact that particular county that you're in and ask them to send you a ballot, but you will need to still meet those requirements before they'll be able to fulfill that for you.
Thank you. Let's switch course just a second, since these other things happen in your office. What's going on with marriage licenses? Are people still getting married at the same pace as before? What are you seeing in that piece of your world?
So I have to admit that when they shut us down, given that we are in the new building, that was not very easy. I am working on the fact that we can start doing some video chat. I've already kind of got some people who I haven't had a whole lot of requests for marriage license. The ones that I have, I've reached back out to them. I have a couple who are going to be kind of my test case on being able to use video conferencing to be able to accomplish where they can get a license. That has not occurred yet because we're working on a time to meet online. And I'm also currently have figured out a really good way to do notary public. So if anybody out there got a little card and they haven't been able to come into the office, yesterday I sent about 79 people emails explaining the process to them because now in the state of Kentucky, if you're a notary, you must have a bond. So the bond gets sent to me, I can prepare the paperwork, I email it to them, and then we video chat to make sure that they take their proper oath, they sign their oath form, and then we're able to exchange that way. And then that way everybody can still do business as usual, well, business online, and that we've got that process. So still working out the particulars, and when I get a really good setup, I'll be putting some of that more information on my website. Also on my website, I have on my news feed a list of how people can transact business online for my office. Of course, phone calls are always good, but I do have some other online processes that are out there if they need to. But notary is the biggest one I'm getting questions for, and I figured that one out. Marriage license, I'll put out the notes once I do my first test case.
There's a fairly vibrant dialogue going on in the chat about pros and cons of mail-in voting, and a related question to all of to that, the potential changes in how we vote. What counsel might you give to citizens who think we should make a change as to how they could make their voice heard on that? The question includes call our state legislators. If you're a citizen who thinks there should be change, what would be a good thing for you to do to try to advocate for that?
The one thing I have to say about our representatives and senators, for the most part, they do get whatever people send to them. I mean, for the most part, I know we have a lot of lobbying groups, whether you belong to a specific group or not. If they are interested in some kind of change to election law, I would recommend anybody to contact, whether it's their local rep or their state senator, and express to them what they're interested in. I see a lot this year in the legislature alone, there was over 35 different bills related to some kind of change in elections that people are looking for. And those ideas come from people's constituents or the legislators themselves. But obviously it's something that everybody's listening to. It's also something that everybody is concerned about. It's also an ongoing process that everybody wants to preserve because it's such a fabulous right that we have. So that being said, yeah, I think that the best way for them to express what they'd like to see is to contact them.
We may be able to get this on the screen, but if not, we'll crowdsource this a little. But if somebody would put in the chat, the Legislative Research Commission site as a spot where you can contact your legislators. It tells you who your senators, state senators, and state representatives are and how you can contact those.
So that would be lrc.ky.gov.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And it's a question about just your staff. Are you having to furlough anybody? What's your, are you at full staff? What's the operation look like?
So right now, because of some of the decisions of the executive order, our business is slowing down a little bit. As far as the executive order, county clerk's offices are considered essential offices. So we are physically closed to the public, but we are working. Today I am working from home. So we have split into teams, Team A and Team B. And I've got what I can. A lot of my work can't be done remotely. I don't, but anybody who can, we've set them up with projects to go home. So they're VPNing into their computers at work, but it's hard for them to scan there. So we've come up with different projects. So whoever's at home, and then I've got people in the office to make sure that we're still processing car renewals, car transfers, and all the recordings and all that stuff. So we've got people on a rotating basis right now. And that only started last week. Up to that point, we were full staff.
Is anything that we would normally do in the county clerk's office delayed right now? So we renew our license plate in our birth month. Is that being enforced fully? Is there just any changes in routines for people?
So when your car, my birthday was in March. If I had not renewed on my birthday, based on the executive order, it basically said that it would not expire for 90 days. So I had 90 days from the time of the executive order to renew my license. It didn't move the date from when I was still due. So when I go ahead and renew, like say in June, okay, I still am always going to have next year my March renewal date. It just means you're not going to get penalties and interest accruing because you're not renewed within the month of your card normally being due. But it also means that it doesn't change your actual date. So it's a good thing. I think it's smart, but most of your legislators, most of your law enforcement also knows that people are out there, that it's not easy to get access. Fiscal court was fabulous. They put a drop box out, 2 of them actually, one for the sheriff and one for myself. So people can drop off their renewals if they'd like to do that now, because it's also boat month. So there's a lot of people who want to make sure their boats are ready to go, because that means they can be outside. And again, the law enforcement knows that as long as it's been within this time period with the executive order, they're not ticketing anybody for somebody who has expired tags.
I want to thank the audience for posting the legislative link. So those of you following the chat can see the links on how to contact your legislator. Pretty simple. There also in the chat is still a lot of questions about voter fraud. And I wonder if you could take a moment to reflect on what our history is with that in this region. Do we have a problem with voter fraud? How do you monitor it? Just up to now, regardless of what happens this year, what level of confidence should we have in the accuracy of the returns?
So as far as fraud, Kentucky does not have there's not a lot of fraud. There's never really been a whole lot of cases. You might have people looked at here and there, but I am not aware of even any that were ever in Kenton County. There have been some concerns or something of that nature if somebody comes into the in the precinct and says, I also live in Ohio and I vote in both places. If somebody's that forward, we may look into it, but I have yet to have a case that has actually been prosecuted or been reviewed for actually brought forward for fraud. I think there's always going to be that concern, because you want to make sure that something that is that important effective and an efficient election. So we have a lot of protocols in place already in which we utilize. Those aren't going to change. One of the things that I think one of the chats said was, well, Oregon and all these other places already have, you know, a full mail-in. You would also require some major changes to your system, because you would also start needing to see where you would have ID, or I should say verification of the signatures by, you know, some kind of software. Because right now we check those, but that volume would be so huge that you would need another tool to be able to, you know, process all of those. So that is something that's there. Now, again, as far as fraud, I don't know how to explain to people that for the most part, our systems work so well in Kentucky altogether. But if somebody really wants to try fraud, I don't know how you could try to stop them. But when it does get caught, then it is punishable. We have, you know, it's a felony in in Kenton County, or actually in Kentucky. So for that part, if it is found, and it can certainly be prosecuted, I think most voters want to exercise their right to vote. They go in, they vote, and they leave. And I think that's why Kentucky doesn't have a whole lot of fraud. And again, you may hear cases of it, or there might be suspected, but after it's been reviewed, and again, I don't want to speak for everybody. I can only speak for Kenton County, but over my 11 or 12 years of being an election official, I have yet to see one that's come to fruition where it was true fraud.
I'm going to switch back. Sorry to keep kind of going back between your various duties, but we had a question.
Sure.
We were talking about car registrations, about boat registrations, if there's some grace period on boat.
All renewals, regardless of whether it flies, drives, or floats.
Just remind folks that we have a lot of commentary going on right now, but if you have a question, post that and we'll get that asked. How's morale in your office? We're all sort of dealing with something new and different. Everybody adjusting?
Well, I have to say, a total shout out to my staff. Everybody has such a really good sense of humor. To be able to accommodate what I was doing, because I have glass, when we first had to have the social distancing in the new building at 1847 Kenton Way, I closed, well, actually, it was a mutual decision because the sheriff is also in there as well as the PBA. For our staff's protection, we moved everybody into the building in Covington because we were behind glass, and having everybody in one place for a while also allowed me to start doing this team rotation to keep everybody healthy and safe at home. But actually, everybody's had a great sense of humor about it. We're having our own little competition about how great Team A versus Team B is at this point. I'm going to have to get T-shirts, I think, after this is all over, and there will always be a decision on who's the better team. And since I'm on Team B, I'm pretty sure it's Team
B. Gabe, in an ordinary, if we can use the word ordinary right now, an ordinary course of elections, how we vote changes from time to time. I think I remember correctly that in Kenton County, we were using touch screens, and maybe after the hanging chads, we switched to scanners. Are we happy with the machines we're using right now? Just if everything was normal, would we have any changes?
If everything was normal, we're going to be having changes in equipment for sure. For one thing, the legislators, and bipartisan issue, everybody wants an evidence-based election. So as the equipment we have gets older, we are going to be looking at a completely paper-based system. And what that means is you'll still have scanners, but everything will have a paper base. So if there is a recount or recanvass, you can actually have that paper in hand. So Kenton County is already has designated some monies for us to be purchasing new voting equipment. That also got kind of put on hold because of this situation. We have an RFP that will be being put together here to look at new equipment. And what that means is you're still going to have your handicap accessible machine. It's just going to be producing a piece of paper, and then you'll have your scanners, and you'll always now have that evidence-based system. So that has not been hard-coded in the statute at this point, But again, there have been several statutory requirements for that to happen. And I believe one of those bills may be signed by the governor. I'm not sure. And if that's the case, as this equipment, which is really aging out, goes away because it is very expensive to replace, then most of the counties are going to be moving to a completely paper-based system.
This may be an unanswerable question, but I expect that you've thought about it. Can you imagine a situation where we would not have a general election in November?
That would be hard for me to imagine that we wouldn't. It may look a lot different, but I think it's crucial to everyone's psyche that we try to do the things that are normal for us moving forward. And one of those is our right to vote, and that nothing interrupts that regardless of how that gets accomplished.
Well, we have a little bit of time left, so I'll monitor for questions, but Gabe, any kind of closing remarks or reflections that you would like to offer the audience?
Well, I've been seeing a lot of the chat things that come up, and I see some people out there I know on the video, and hello, everybody. I have to say that I have faith in how our system works. I know it seems unfathomable that we've ended up in a situation where you can't hug your grandkids, or you go to the store and I'm wearing a mask. But at the same time, I'm pretty sure that myself, as well as the rest of the Kenton County, well, the clerks throughout the state, will do what they always have done, which is make sure people have the right to vote, that we're going to do everything we can to make sure it's efficient and fair and safe and deal with all our security protocols. And that, you know, we've all been talking about this. And then when we know what's going to go on, we can't wait to reach out to everybody so that we can start this process, because, you know, all of us who do this on a regular basis know that regardless of what happens, I feel that it will still be a great election, and everybody can you know, be secure in the fact, or I guess be okay with the fact that it will be a good election and the result will be a very valid result. And again, if everybody wanted a paper-based system, this will be it. We'll have a paper-based evidence trail, not just here, but in all those other counties in which they never used paper before, because they're going to have to, you know, convert right away if we end up doing a mail-only kind of balloting system for the primary.
Well, thanks very much for doing this. Audience, I urge you to go to the Northern Kentucky Forum's website, which is nkyforum.org. If you have an idea for us for one of these cafes, please send an email. You can also message us on Facebook, and our board will look for those ideas and try to respond to them. We hope to be back with you in person in the not too distant future. Our cafes are usually in the morning, and we usually have bagels and donuts and coffee and tea and orange juice. Sorry, we can't provide that virtually, but I hope you're having a coffee, tea, or orange juice, or the beverage of your choice here from the comfort of your home as we do this. We also have been experimenting in a partnership with the National Issues Forum on discussion of the issues in the 2020 presidential election. So you'll see some events related to that. And once we're live and in person, we'll begin to do evening panels that have last a little longer and have discussion of public affairs. Our goal is to have civic discussions about issues of importance to Northern Kentucky. So we appreciate your ideas. I give a little quick commercial. My office, the Scripps Howard Center for Civic Engagement at NKU, is working to connect the campus and the community. And on Tuesday, we will launch at 7 p.m., Tuesday through Thursday, a story time. It'll last about 15 minutes. So if you have children or grandchildren and you want to tune in, you can, our faculty and students will take turns reading a story on those evenings at 7 o'clock. So I'd love to have you tune in. You can follow that on Facebook at NKU story time. So that starts next week. Would love to have you as part of that. And thanks for being with us. And here's to back to normal soon. Thank you, Gabrielle.
Mark, and I would just say, if you need me back on once we know what the answers are, I'd be happy to present.
Well, thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone, and be safe.